stop being present to everything. The Buddha said, "Do this instead." There's a passage where the Buddha says, "Let an observant person come who is honest and no deceiver, and I'll teach that person the Dhamma." It's interesting that those are the qualities he looked for in a student. They have to do with your ability to observe yourself. You observe your actions, and you report them truly as to whether they're good actions or bad actions. You report them to yourself, and if necessary, you report them to other people. That's the beginning of the Dhamma right there. When the Buddha taught Rahula, one of the first images he used was a mirror. You look into the mirror to observe yourself. In the same way, you look at your actions. You pass judgment on them. You start with your intentions. This intention, if I follow through with it, will it harm anybody? If it would, you don't do it. If you don't foresee any harm, you go ahead. You're working with your best intentions, and then seeing how good your best intentions are, where they can be improved, because that's the next stage. You actually act on them, and you observe the results of your actions. If you see any harm coming up, you stop. If you don't see any harm, you can continue. Then you look at the long-term results of the action. If there was any harm, you decide not to do it again, and you go talk it over with someone else who's more advanced on the path, to get their ideas, take advantage of their knowledge and experience, and also to be truthful again, to be honest again. Because there is that tendency. If you start hiding things from other people, you start hiding them from yourself. And if you start hiding things from yourself inside, there's a lot you're not going to see. Things go underground and they don't get trained. But if you see that you didn't cause any harm, then you take joy in that fact and encourage yourself to make further progress on the path. That's how you develop your powers of observation and your honesty. You give them focus. You focus on your actions. This has to do with not only actions of the body, but also actions of speech and actions of the mind. Like right now, as we're meditating, we're engaged in actions of the mind, and you want to observe these too. What are you doing right now? When the Buddha talks about developing mindfulness, he says that you want to be ardent, alert, and mindful. Mindful is remembering what to do, and alert is watching what you're actually doing. Here again, the mirror comes in. You judge what you're doing against what you're mindful that you were trying to do, and decide what needs to be done to improve. That's all part of ardency. Ardency, of those three qualities, is the beginning of wisdom. But it depends on mindfulness and alertness as well. You see something that needs to be improved, and you try to improve it. You see something that needs to be maintained, you try to maintain it. So, right now as you're working with the breath, how's it going? Does it feel comfortable? If it doesn't feel comfortable, what changes would be better? Would it be better to be longer or shorter, faster, slower, heavier, lighter, deeper, more shallow? This is an area where you can experiment. It's one of the nice things about concentration practice. The purpose is to create a sense of well-being. Some people don't like the word concentration because it sounds too tense, but it's precisely the quality that you're trying to develop. You give the mind a center, and everything you're doing is gathered around that center, and it's stable. It builds on the quality of calm. The Pali term is passaddhi. But concentration goes deeper and is more solid than just calm. It's really stable, steady, centered. To get it there, you have to observe how well you're settling in with the breath and what needs to be improved. Do the improvements have to be in the breath or in the mind? Improvements in the mind would require stepping back for a bit and asking yourself, okay, what moods in the mind are getting in the way? You sometimes carry in moods from the day, so what can you do to counteract those moods? This is why the Buddha didn't teach just breath meditation. He taught all kinds of meditation topics that are good for getting the mind to settle in, getting it to let go, at least temporarily, of the unskillful things that are weighing it down. Think thoughts of goodwill. Goodwill for yourself, goodwill for others. Or think about taking the body apart in your imagination, all the different parts inside. If you're having a problem with lust or sensual desire, okay, take this apart to see what is there that's really worth lusting for. You realize that lust has very little to do with the actual object. It has a lot to do with the mind's desire to have something to desire. That's one of the strange qualities of the mind. Sometimes it has desire for desire's sake, not for the sake of any particular object. Look into that. You can see these things only if you're reflective, if you're alert to watching what's going on and making an effort to do it well. Because you can watch what's going on and just say, well, that's the way things are. I'll accept it. But you don't learn anything that way. Accept what you are as a fact that then can be built on. That's the role of acceptance in the meditation. There are potentials in the present moment. The mind has potentials. The body has potentials. They don't just sit there, they get provoked. And they can be provoked in a good way or a bad way. The breath is the easiest potential to work with, so that's why we start with it. We adjust it to see what potentials there are in the breath. As the Buddha said, when the mind settles down with the breath, there can be a strong sense of pleasure, a strong sense of rapture or refreshment. That potential is there in the breath someplace, in the quality of the breath energy in the body. So, keep that possibility in mind. This is an important principle in the meditation. You're not just observing what's there, you're also keeping in mind certain possibilities. This is part of mindfulness. You remember lessons that you've learned, starting with the fact that there's somebody who, 2,600 years ago, gained awakening watching the breath. So this must be a good thing. He talks about the potentials of rapture and pleasure in the breath, so they must be there someplace. Keep that in mind. There are more potentials here, more possibilities here than you would have imagined on your own. This is where mindfulness and alertness and ardency move into the factors of jhana or right concentration, directed thought, evaluation, and singleness of preoccupation. Everything is gathered around that one center. But still, you're observing. That's what the evaluation is for. You notice how the breath is going, how it could go better, or if it's as good as it can get, how to maintain it. You do this by experimenting and then looking at the results to decide what can be improved, what's working, what's not working. Again, the mirror. the same principles that the Buddha taught to Rahula start getting applied to the meditation. You begin to realize, as the mind settles down, that some of the thoughts that used to harass it or weigh it down are far away for the time being. They may not be totally cut off, but they're not really making any impingement on your awareness. So you appreciate that fact. A lot of concentration comes in, learning how to appreciate it, because there is that problem that once the mind settles down and is really still, not much is happening, and part of the mind can get bored. So to counteract that, you have to realize, okay, the fact that the mind is just sitting here, it's a lot lighter than it was when it was thinking about other things. There's a sense of well-being that comes naturally as the mind settles in. You appreciate that. Then you ask yourself, okay, is there still a disturbance in here? What am I doing to cause that disturbance? This is an important part of being observant. There are a lot of things you could observe in the world right now. You could observe the fact that the helicopter is coming. You could observe that fact that it's awfully wet outside. But what does that accomplish? I was just listening yesterday to a French Dhamma teacher saying that mindfulness is all about just being totally present to everything that's coming into your senses all at once. Well, what's coming into your senses all at once is not causing you to suffer. What's causing you to suffer is your own actions, which is why the Buddha says to focus there, on what you're doing. Be alert to what you're doing. When engaged in evaluation, vichara, you're evaluating your actions. When you're moving into what the Buddha calls emptiness as an attitude, and you're trying to see where the disturbances are in your meditation, you don't blame the sounds outside or the pains in the body. You look for what the mind is doing right now. As Ajahn Chah says, it's not that the sounds are disturbing you. You're disturbing the sounds. In other words, you're engaged in a commentary on the sounds, and the same with your pains. The pains are not there trying to destroy your concentration. You're the one who's running a commentary on the pains. That's what's disturbing your concentration, so that's what you want to look at. What am I doing that's weighing the mind down, and how can I stop? That's the whole message of the Four Noble Truths, which is why the Buddha started his discussions on the Dhamma with the image of the mirror. You're reflecting to see that the suffering that's weighing the mind down is not coming from anywhere else. It's coming from inside. And the path to the end of that suffering comes from inside as well. So that's where you have to look. And you're going to perfect that path. How? You can't take your path out and measure it against the Buddha's path. You can measure it in the words, but you can't see what the Buddha actually did. You're taking the words and you're trying to translate them into what you're doing right now. And then you have to ask yourself, does this seem to be working? Does it seem to be heading in the right direction? So a lot of this is simply feeling your way. Tell yourself, if something's not working, it must not be right. Let's go back and check it again. I've told you the story about Ajahn Fuang saying that when he started out meditating, he didn't have the advantages we have with all these books on how to meditate. He was just told, okay, get your mind to settle down. So he kept thinking, down, 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 down. And the mind got really heavy. He finally realized, this must not be right. So he decided to compensate. Well, how about up, 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 up? He brought his mind up, but then it got too scattered. So he figured, well, There must be a just right in here someplace. So go on that assumption. The Buddha must have taught something right. If things are not going right in your meditation, either you're not in line with what you were taught, or you misunderstood what you were taught. So you have to go back and check things. This is how you make progress, assuming that there must be a way out. The Buddha said it lies around in here someplace. So you keep looking and looking and looking in here. As long as you have that assumption, there is a way out and you can find it. You're going to find it at some point, but it's going to take a lot of reflection. Just make sure your reflection is focused on what you're doing. Concentration is maintaining that focus. Discernment lies in seeing how well you're doing it. It's very closely related to evaluation. In fact, Ajahn Lee says that that's the discernment part of concentration practice, the evaluation. There'll be times when the mind can put down the evaluation and simply rest. But even as you go through the higher jhanas, there'll be moments of evaluation when you realize, okay, the mind is settled down, but there's still some disturbance in here. What is the disturbance? What am I doing? You have to think about that. Observe. You notice that when you do this, the level of stress goes up. When you stop doing it, the level of stress goes down. If that's the case, learn how to stop. Then rest with that quieter state until your sensitivities develop and you can see, hey, there's still some disturbance here. And you go through the same process again. So, the practice is all of a piece. You commit yourself, you reflect, and you commit yourself some more. It's a back and forth between doing and observing. That's how you feel your way, so that the meditator inside gets trained, and the teacher who teaches the meditator inside gets trained as well in how to be really honest and really observant. These qualities start out as ordinary qualities. As Ajahn Mahabua says, mindfulness turns into great mindfulness. Discernment turns into great discernment. In the same way, these ordinary qualities can yield extraordinary results if you really develop them. A mirror for the mind. When I was in Brazil, one of the people on the retreat asked a question. Actually, it was less a question than a statement. She had been told that when we meditate, we should meditate with our eyes half open, because the purpose of the meditation was to help with our work in the world, and because the work of the world is done with your eyes open, you should meditate with your eyes at least half open. I had no problem with meditating with eyes half open. It's a practical issue. The Buddha himself, when he gave meditation instructions, said nothing about whether your eyes should be opened or closed. So it's a matter of personal choice. If you find that meditating with your eyes closed puts you to sleep, keep them open. Simply make sure that you don't stare. Keep your focus gentle, fuzzy. If, however, having your eyes open is distracting, keep them closed. You make your choice based on what works. The point that I did have a problem with was the idea that we're meditating for the sake of the work of the world. We're not training the mind for the sake of the world. We're training the mind for the sake of the mind. So as you sit here right now, put all your other concerns aside, because the big issue is not the world outside. The big issue is your mind, and and you now have the time to focus total attention on the mind. There's nowhere else you have to go, nothing else you have to think about. The mind at this moment doesn't have to be a servant to anybody. All too often, we have to serve the needs of the body, serve the needs of our social responsibilities. But right now, you can put those aside. The only issue in the body right now is how it feels from within, and you want to inhabit it from within. Give the mind a good place to stay right here so that it's not wandering around outside like an orphan. It's got a home, a comfortable home, and it's in charge. When the Buddha says that there's no one in charge, he's talking about the world. This is especially clear right now. There's so much ignorance going around. People not knowing what to do, nobody really in charge. What that means is that you can put your mind in charge of your mind. You have that choice. If we lived in a world where someone had set the purpose for the world, we'd have to sacrifice our happiness for that purpose. But there's no one in charge. So you're free to decide what you want to do right now. When you look into it, you see that the big problem in the mind is, why is it that we start out with the desire for happiness? Then it seems to go underground. And when it comes out in our actions, it's creating pain, creating suffering. What happened in between? Why the ignorance? Part of the ignorance, of course, is that our attention is directed outside. If you want to have it rightly directed, turn the arrow around. Bring it inside. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha's basic image for the practice is of a mirror. At the very beginning of his teachings to Rahula, introducing the practice as a whole, he asked Rahula, "What is the purpose of a mirror?" Rahula answered, "For reflection." In the same way, the Buddha said, you should reflect on your bodily deeds, your verbal deeds, and your mental deeds. You look inside, and you do that by looking at your actions. Right now, your actions are limited to the mind. In other words, you're not saying anything right now, and the body's doing nothing aside from fidgeting a little bit. Otherwise, there's nothing outside. It's just mental action that you're focusing on. So, what are your mental acts? In terms of mindfulness, you've got mindfulness, alertness, and ardency. In terms of concentration, your acts are directed thought and evaluation, plus the effort to bring that directed thought and evaluation to one object. So keep your eye on those activities. Direct your thoughts to the breath. Evaluate the breath. Be mindful of the breath. Be alert to the breath. Be ardent in trying to create a sense of well-being, a sense of solidity, a sense of stillness right here. Why? Because you want to see things clearly. You don't want the mirror to be obscured. There's that Zen story where a poem begins by saying that we're trying to clean the dust off the mirror being the mind, and then someone comes along and says, actually, there is no mirror at all. So where is the dust going to collect? What is there to clear off? It's a clever story, but that's not what the mirror is. The mirror is not the mind itself. The mirror is in its actions. Because the mind does act. It's a proactive thing. It's not simply sitting here passive. It's going out and looking for things. So you direct it to look for things that are right here, right now, so that you can see it close up, in action. As you're doing this, you'll see a little bit of greed slipping into your actions, or a little bit of anger or fear. Other things slip in. But if you're looking carefully, you'll see them, and that's the important thing. You want to see these things because they're the factors that obscure the course of how you start out with an intention for well-being and then end up with something that's not well-being. This is where the big ignorance lies, in how the mind is acting and how it doesn't understand its actions. So our goal is to understand our actions so that we can stop creating suffering. This is what we mean when we say that we train the mind for the sake of the mind. If our actions are done in ignorance, they lead to suffering. If they're done in knowledge, they become a path to the end of suffering. And that goal, the end of suffering, is worthy in and of itself. The Buddha does praise people who work for their own good and for the good of others. He said, they're better than people who work only for their own good. But then people work only for their own good, he said, are better than people who neglect their own good and try to work for the good of others. In his way of seeing things, working for your own good means practicing. Working for the good of others means getting them to practice. It's not the case that you can to go out and save them from their suffering. You can help them with their external circumstances so that they experience less pain and disappointment in life, up to some extent. But the question of whether they're going to suffer from even a comfortable life, that's up to them. You can give them advice on how not to create suffering, but they have to follow the advice, and that's their choice. And if you haven't followed the advice yourself, it's not going to have much impact. It's not going to have much power. So everything reverts right here. Your attention is always directed back inside. That's what the mirror is for, to watch your actions inside, to clean up your actions inside. The Buddha has another image of a mirror. A young man or young woman, fond of adornment, fond of beauty, looking in the mirror and seeing a blemish, immediately will wipe the blemish away. That's why we're looking in the mirror. If there's a blemish in our actions, it's a sign of a blemish in the mind. Clear away the blemish in the action, and the mind will be clear. When it looks for happiness, it'll act in a way that does lead to happiness. When that problem has been solved, you've accomplished a lot right there. It's enough in and of itself. Anything more, anything else you give to the world, is totally a free gift. As the Buddha said, those who've attained full awakening are totally without debt. They have no obligations to the world at all. Even the Buddha himself, after gaining his awakening, after all those many eons of developing the perfections for the sake of full Buddhahood, still had the choice. He could have decided not to teach, but he freely chose to teach. That decision to teach was a free gift, above and beyond what he had to do. So our main duty is our own minds. We train the mind for the sake of the mind. We're generous, we're virtuous, and we meditate for the sake of the mind. Anything beyond that is a free gift. There are no obligations, because you've taken care of a human being's main duty to comprehend stress, abandon its cause, and develop the path so that you can realize its cessation. It's at that point that the job is done. Anything beyond that is not a job. It's not a duty. It's a gift.